Friday show, and the weekend is here as we get set to welcome Celtic back into our lives. It's been a long 2 weeks, it really has been, but in a matter of days, just 2 of them, slightly more than 2 if you're watching this very early on Friday, Celtic are back and we're facing Dundee. We're going to build ahead to that a bit today. There's a few other things I want to cover as well, and we're doing that with Practical CBT, the legends who help you find great mental health. For Celtic AM listeners, there's an exclusive discount of up to 33% on online courses and coaching sessions with Practical CBT. So find a link, it's at the top of the description, it's even pinned as a comment, and get involved. They support the channel big time, so why not support them? Oh, and while I'm talking about this kind of thing, we're very close, agonisingly close, some would say, to 18,000 subscribers. So, you know, if you haven't subscribed, click that button, totally free, etc, etc. Get us to the magic 18. Oh, while we're on the subject of the number 18, I see Neil Lennon was in the media yesterday telling us that he doesn't agree or understand the protests aimed at the likes of Dermot Desmond and Peter Lawwell. He described Dermot Desmond, I think, as like a genius and the most intelligent man he's ever met in his life. You know what, we're not going to do this story actually, because it's just a bit of nonsense and we don't need that in our lives. Big story yesterday, bit of a surprise transfer story that you've probably heard about, came from Martin Hardy and The Times, who are reporting that we are set to sign the young English midfielder Bobby Clark for £6 million in January. So a bit of a bombshell, that one, in the time, and I can't really remember Celtic being spoken about in terms of having agreed like a multi-million-pound deal a couple of months in advance. So it's a bit of a strange one, and Bobby Clark, I think he was maybe linked with us like 18 months or so ago, I vaguely remember, but there's certainly not been anything recently with him. Just a quick snapshot of his career and how it's gone so far, because he's still very young. He's 20 years old. He's a central midfielder. He is the son of the former Newcastle United player and brief Kilmarnock manager Lee Clark. He spent the majority of his youth career at Newcastle, but signed for Liverpool just as he was approaching the start of his professional career. That's where his professional career started, at Liverpool under Jurgen Klopp. Played in a few games, I think most notably a League Cup final against Chelsea. You can tell I've not really got too much knowledge of English football, but he certainly has a name that I can kind of remember seeing a few times at Liverpool. He left them though to join Red Bull Salzburg summer before the one just there, so just over a year ago. That was for around £10 million, and the link there was that the former Liverpool assistant manager Pep Linders had become the Salzburg manager at that stage, so he clearly wanted to bring in players that he knew, and he went to Bobby Clark, which I think is interesting. So he played a fair bit last season for Salzburg, including in the Champions League where he made his debut. But in August, he went back to England and he signed for Championship side Derby County on a season-long loan. So he is a Salzburg player who's currently on loan at Derby. As I say, it was a season-long loan that he signed in the summer, but as we know, these things can be cut short. And the Times seem pretty confident that a move to Celtic is going to happen right at the start of the January window. This wasn't just put forward as like a rumour. This was basically said, we set to sign for Celtic. And they say that Clark was keen for a permanent return to the UK. So it's certainly an interesting one. As I say, it's quite a kind of unique situation for Celtic. You may have some examples going back in years where this kind of thing has happened. I can't remember too many off the top of my head, and that does, I guess, by its very nature, make you sceptical. There's also been, a few reports yesterday saying that Celtic haven't actually made any contact with Salzburg yet, so that would clearly, again, make you sceptical about this deal happening. And we even had Derby boss John Eustace being asked about this yesterday and saying that he hadn't heard anything about any links to Celtic. However, it is just worth pointing out that the journalist who broke this story at the Times, Martin Hardy, does have links to Bobby Clark's father, Lee Clark. He has appeared on a Newcastle podcast. It's called Here to Compete, and he's appeared in that with Lee Clark. I'm not an avid listener of that show, but he's definitely been on that once, as there was an image shared by the journalist. You probably know his face, Pete Graves. He's on the Sky Sports, and he does that podcast as well. So those two at the bottom certainly know each other, so that would maybe lead you to think that Lee Clark is a pretty good source on this one, and clearly being Bobby Clark's father, he would be. So yeah, upshot here is, after saying all that, we don't really know exactly what's going on here. I would certainly suggest that it's positive that Celtic are being linked with players this early, and there's been quite, definitive language being used. But as we often say, rumours are one thing, signings are another. I mean, I'm always saying that. Oh, just very final note, Bobby Clark signed a 5-year contract with Salzburg last year, so he's only just over 20% into that. So we would probably have to part with a decent amount of money to sign him in January. I think, just generally thinking about the Celtic picture for January, because it feels like we have just finished that window, and we have, but we are only, 2.5 months away from the January transfer window. And I think it is interesting just to kind of ponder what kind of business Celtic are going to do. And clearly it's a squad that has some weak areas. I mean, we don't really have a starting right winger. So that's a position you'd be looking for the club to sign someone in January. The midfield is looking pretty stale and in need of something in there. Now, Bobby Clark could be that something. I would argue we'd probably need a couple of midfielders to come in there. There's going to be chat, I think, about Daizen Maeda potentially moving on. Maybe another player on top of that as well. It feels like we're in that kind of situation. And obviously, there's the whole Brendan Rodgers question as well. And I did notice a report yesterday, and apologies for using TalkSport as a source. I should really just see myself out. I'm going to go and see myself out, everyone. That's me back. TalkSport yesterday reporting that they understand that Brendan Rodgers is, quote, increasingly likely to leave Celtic at the end of his contract, which is, of course, at the end of this season. They're speaking about him potentially going back to the English Premier League. So is January going to be like a sticking plasters window where we get a few loans in and just kind of, to be honest, continue what this season appears to be at this point? Don't it up season, and let's just try and win the league by any means necessary, maybe grab a cup as well, and then we'll hopefully have some sort of change at the club next year, whether that be just the manager or something more broad in terms of, the hierarchy of the club, or some sort of kind of fan advisory board that I know has been mentioned, and that my pal, I think he's a pal, John McGinley, wrote about on the Celtic Way yesterday. I'll link that in the description, because I thought that was a really good read if you're not sure on what a fan advisory board is and what could happen at Celtic. And this is apparently something that is being looked at by the club. Where was I? Yeah, is this January window just going to be a sticking plasters type window where we get a few loans in and try and stumble on to the end of the season and then rebuild next summer under a new manager? Or is there any chance Brendan Rodgers stays? I mean, looking at someone like Bobby Clark, if we were to pay that amount of money on a pretty young player, it does strike me as maybe the kind of player that Brendan Rodgers would quite like to work with. And I don't know if that's just the Liverpool link in my mind, but a young English player, clearly with talent, midfielder. We know Brendan Rodgers loves to work with those kind of players and improve their game. And if Celtic, and I realise this, hasn't happened yet, this deal hasn't been confirmed, but if it was to happen, would paying that amount of money suggest that Brendan Rodgers is going to stay on beyond the end of this season? I think whenever Brendan Rodgers speaks, he talks about, he's more than, happy, wants to stay on if the club can up their game in certain areas. We all know those areas. And also maybe if a certain boardroom figure was to depart as well. Surname rhymes with Brawl. Anyway, let's just all relax ourselves and think about Celtic being back on Sunday. We return Sunday, high noon, as Ian Crocker will say, at Dens Park against Dundee. Against a side who are struggling badly this season. Dundee are 11th in the league, with even Rangers ahead of them. They are managed by our former player, Stephen Elvis Presley. He's had a few crackers already. What was that one at the start of the season? If you're looking for a manager to win things, I'm not your guy. I noticed that he was also getting the Dundee support up for Sunday's game by pointing out that they haven't actually beaten us at Dens Park in 37 years. And I was looking back actually at the last time they beat us anywhere in any competition, and it's back in May 2001 when they beat us 2-0 at Celtic Park. Fabian Caballero was the goal scorer. He actually died last year, which is something that I didn't realise. I realised I went very Alan Partridge there. But he was the goal scorer who scored both goals last time Dundee beat us. But you're going back a long way. I was actually counting the games since that last defeat we had against them. 46 meetings since that game, and we've won 39 of those with 7 draws. One of those draws was last season at Dens Park. We weren't particularly great that night. Austin Trusty had a bit of a shocker. Brendan Rodgers called him out, I think, after the game. But in general, we have a pretty immense record against Dundee, and I think most people would expect that to continue on Sunday. What kind of lineup will we see the manager name? Well, I guess we'll get a better idea of that probably later today when he speaks to the media. Going to be interesting to find out what the story is with Dyson Maeda. Remember, just if you've zoned out over the international break, he pulled out of the Japan squad. I think he was on the bench for their first game, I want to say, against Paraguay, but then pulled out of the squad for the subsequent game against Brazil with like a left foot or left leg injury, one of the two. So, is he going to be ready to play on Sunday? You probably have to have doubts, but it might just be one of those few day injury things and he's ready to go. But Sebastian Tenekti, another one who there were some questions about over the international break, but he did play 45 minutes for Tunisia in their second match. So we'll get a feeling for that and any other potential injuries that have happened during the break. Hoping to see Alistair Johnson back in the matchday squad as well. Now, in terms of my team, assuming that Dyson isn't fit, I'm going to go for Casper in goals. I'm not absolutely certain it'll be Casper. I've just got a wee weird feeling that he might go Sinizalo. I'm not picking him clearly, but I know Schmeichel I don't think was back in training until maybe yesterday, possibly even today. I know Sinizalo's international games were a little bit earlier, and he's obviously a bit younger. So I'm just wondering if maybe Sinizalo could play this one. I could be totally wrong there. Kobe Donovan at right back, Carter Vickers, Scales in the centre, Tierney at left back. Midfield, something has to change for me. We can't keep just putting out the same midfield and hoping for different results. But I'm going McGregor, Engels, McCowan. And I'm kind of saying that, and I've not got total faith in that midfield, but I do think, Luke McCowan back at Dens Park for this game, he did quite well that season. Last season he scored there, didn't he, with a really good header, I think from a Greg Taylor cross. So always got a point to prove. I want to see Arnie Engels just given a bit of a run, just to really find out if he can lead us through this tricky place we're in terms of our midfield. And yeah, front three, as I say, with no Dyes in there. Ian Acho through the middle. And I think Tenekti and Balikwisha on whatever wings you want to put them on. Balikwisha doesn't look like he can play right wing. There's doubts whether he looks like he can play left wing. Tenekti's looked good on the left, but maybe he could play on the right, where he did start for Tunisia the other day, although he did only last 25 minutes on the right, and then they moved him to the left. So without having watched that game, I'm not sure if he just looked totally hopeless or unable to play in the right. I think I want to see Balikwisha start this game if Dyson isn't around, and possibly even if Dyson is around. I just think that was a really big moment for him at the end of the last run of games, the Motherwell assist. He's been, kind of in the media, I guess, on Celtic TV over the international break, gave an interview, did a Q&A as well. Maybe I've just been sucked into some sort of Balikwisha hype, but he must have something to offer us. And maybe it was just a case of those first number of weeks getting settled in. He was living in a hotel, he's got a young family, and hopefully now he can kick on a bit like Nicholas Kuhn did, although it did take Kuhn longer than a month. It was really 4 or 5 months, wasn't it? So, yeah, I want to see Balikwisha starting front three of Balikwisha, Tenekte and Iheanacho for me. I've said this a number of times now, but I think Brendan has to be bold. I don't think he can keep going with the players who have kind of failed us so far this season. He needs to go with the fresh, hungry players, the guys who are just kind of in this Celtic bubble at the moment. I'm not talking about the Celtic board when I say that. I'm talking about guys like Iheanacho, who's loving life, Tenekte, loving life at Celtic, Balikwisha, maybe to a lesser extent, but guys like Colby Donovan as well. Get these guys in the team right now, because I just think that infectious personality is going to get us through this, or is more likely to get us through this than going back to guys like Reo Hatate and possibly even Daisen Maeda as well. And I'm not saying those guys don't have something to offer, but I just think at this very moment, as a fan and wanting to be excited when that team comes out an hour and a quarter before the game, I want to look at that team and think, right, I can't wait to watch him today. And I just don't really get that feeling with a lot of the older guard at the moment. Anyway, I've waffled on for a fair bit. Officials for Sunday, the referee's Matthew McDermott. Assistants are Dougie Potter and Chris Ray. VAR is Gavin Duncan. Assistant VAR is Duncan Nicholson. A lot of Duncans in there. And yeah, I do think Celtic will be okay in this match. I just love to come away from the game seeing some real positives. Can Iheanacho show his quality again? Can Balikwisha show us he's got something? Can our midfield find a way to function better? I guess, as always, winning is the most important thing, but it'd be great to see a good performance as well. Right, no video tomorrow, everyone. I'm dressing up in lederhosen because it's some sort of Oktoberfest here. So, don't know why I've shared that. There will be no video tomorrow. However, I promise, first thing on Monday, we'll have a reaction to the Dundee game. Enjoy it. Hopefully the team can help us enjoy it and put in a good performance. And then we'll properly get back into things from Monday.